one of the difficulties about purpose and a calling is that, first of all, it's not being taught from the pulpit. So people don't even know to look for it, even though it's throughout the Bible. Psalm 139, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. Jeremiah 1, I knew you before you were formed. Ephesians 2:10, you were created for good works that God prepared before before you took your first breath. It's throughout the Bible, but we're not taught from the pulpit about purpose. Or we'll sing, we'll see a gifted worship leader with a beautiful voice, and we go, I wish that was me, but I know that's not me. Or we'll see somebody that's just super loving and joyful and giving and so forth, and you go, well, I can see part of me like that, but that's not me either. Everybody's purpose is as unique as their DNA and as their fingerprint. And when they figure that out, then they can start saying yes to the unique good works that God has for them. Well, hello, Cody. My name is JR. I'm the founder of the Brushfires ministry. We help believers discover their God-given purpose and design. Where do they fit in the body of Christ? And we're a cutting-edge ministry that uses online services, psychometric assessments, video series to help people discover who God created them to be so that they can be obedient to that calling.
That's I say this a lot, man, but I think like what is your purpose on this earth? I think that is that's a huge question, a very big question. What was there something that inspired that mission for you? Like helping people find what their purpose is?
Well, I will say that this is, looking back my life, this has been a calling that seems to come up consistently. It's putting the right people in the right position. When I coached soccer, I had a knack for being able to see what kids could perform and what kind of roles. And when I was running my software company, I was able to figure out which people could actually work well in certain areas. So it's a natural gifting of figuring out where people are and where they best fit. And then there was also just a natural understanding of where my calling is, where my strengths are and so forth. And seeing how the church operates and not seeing that work out where people kind of show up for Sunday, give their nod to God, and then they're done. And there's no real impact on them. There's no real impact on the community. There's no real change in their life. And so, it was a frustrating thing for me to be able to see people do that. And the church kind of really missed the mark as far as creating disciples. So I think it was a combination of just how God has wired me and my sensitivity towards that, and just the frustration of things not working like I think they are intended to work.
Yeah, you mentioned putting the right people in the right place. And I think you mentioned in sports, you mentioned in the church, you see that in business. I mean, it is incredibly important to have the right person in the right space, in the right place. So when you work with people, are you working like on the individual level? Or are you working with actual, like, I guess maybe churches or businesses, or do you work just with the individual? This episode is brought to you by Excel Coaching Academy. Hey guys, I'm really excited to let you know that I started a mindset coaching business. So what I want to do with this business is I want to help entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, leaders, and fitness enthusiasts or athletes develop the right mindset to increase revenue, improve business or performance, and overcome the challenges needed to become the best version of themselves. You can get more information about this by emailing info@excelcoaching.academy.
Actually, we work with all three.
Okay.
With individuals, we're really focused in on their area. With businesses and organizations and churches, it's about getting their people to be able to work together in unity, to be able to get the right people, to be able to accomplish the goals of the organization or the church. And so it really depends upon who we're talking to and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So for us, it's a matter of, if we're dealing with leaders, we want them to start looking at the people as the resources that God has given them, and for them to properly use them, not for their agenda, but for God's agenda. And that's where things kind of fall short. In business, it's easy to motivate people because you're paying them.
Right.
You can motivate them through promotions or raises and so forth. In the church, it's a lot harder because everybody's a volunteer for the most part. So now you really have to talk to that individual spirit so that they can see exactly where they fit and how they can actually walk into that calling that God has for their lives. The problem is with a lot of churches, that takes personal investment in the individual. You can't do that in a simple little program where, 20 people show up for a program and in 20 minutes they all know their purpose. No, you got to sit down individually with the person and get to know them and have an interest in helping them walk that out. And that's where I think the current American church is just not wanting to put in that labor to be able to help people through the sanctification process and to become the disciples that make other disciples.
Okay. So when you're working with people on purpose, is there a lot of talk about what happens outside of them and like how their purpose affects other people? And the reason I asked that, because I think I was talking to Mark Collins, Pastor Mark Collins, on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the story of the cross, Jesus carrying the cross. And I think when we see that story, what we think of is like unconditional love to save the human race. I think that's the general message that's sort of sent there. But I think one thing that also too is it's like he was acting out the biggest purpose that ever could be acted out,
Yes.
for the human race. And so I think purpose is a very big lesson, maybe from the Bible. Maybe lesson is not the right word, but I think it's something we can extract from the Bible.
So there's another things that people miss in Christ's human experience here on earth. First of all, he didn't do things as a sovereign God. He did things as a man. He hurt like a man. He hungered like a man. Whatever he did is because the Father told him to do it, and the Holy Spirit worked it out through him. He basically left his divinity in heaven. And when he came to earth, he operated like a man. Now, he operated like a sinless man, which none of us have the opportunity of doing anymore, but he still operated in obedience to the Father's calling. And that is something that each and every one of us can do. Romans 8:28 gets quoted a lot because of how it starts. But I like to emphasize it this way. For those who love God, for those who are called to his purposes, God calls all things to work out for good. When you are obediently taking your free will and you're saying, God, I am trying to do this as I believe that you're calling me to do. Lord, give me the guidance, give me the wisdom, open the doors, help me to accomplish what it is that you have laid on my soul to be able to live out. That's what Jesus did. He came here for one purpose, and it's not what the Jews thought. It's not what his disciples initially thought. It wasn't about releasing them from Roman captivity. It was about paying their sin debt for them and everybody else. That was their greatest need. Their immediate need was Rome. Christ wasn't interested in that. Christ was interested in their greatest need. So when we look at our purpose, it's from a perspective of God's intention. What does he want to accomplish in this world? And quite likely, you're not going to see all the impact. You're not going to get the big picture because it's not for you. You're simply to be obedient. If he says, call up your friend, and you go, oh man, he's really mad at me, I don't want to do that. Call your friend because he wants you to reconcile that relationship, or your friend is in great need and needs to hear from you. He wants his children to be obedient to the call and let the results and the strategy in his hands.
Yeah, man, what this really makes me think of is like this purpose. I think you tied it to God's purpose for you. And it's like your purpose is tied to a greater good that is much bigger than yourself. And so if you follow through with pursuing that purpose because of that, because it is something that is much bigger than you, you will be I don't want to say given, you will be granted what you need to fulfill that purpose. And
Exactly.
so, and I guess that leads us to what faith is, like the faith of, because it's man, it's crazy. Like a lot of times people have a goal or something for themselves, a vision, whatever it is, and they want to start a business, they want to start a family, they want to pursue a thing. And it's like sometimes these are really, really intimidating things. And it's intimidating, but at the same time, like this thing just, we have the same goals as some other people, but a lot of times what we have is like very unique to us. And so I personally believe that does come from, like, that's not random. It's not random that we have this goal or this vision for ourselves. And since that was given to us, and I do think it's a gift, since that was given to us, that should already tell us that we have, or at least we will get what we need to make that goal or that vision or that purpose happen. But I think a lot of times it's hard for us to have the faith in that initially, especially when, like we see ourselves as so small compared to the goal that we have, the life we want to build for ourselves.
Yeah, God is very strategic in that He doesn't show you all the things that you're going to go through
Right.
when you are obedient to His call, because He knows that you'll shrink back and say, oh, "That's not for me." When I was called to this ministry, I would have never imagined the things that He was going to cause me to do, and the people that I was going to impact, and the resistance I was going to receive. All those things are part of the challenge, and they require steps of faith as you address each one of those. One thing that is important for people to understand, when we talk about purpose, we actually produce a statement at the end of our program called a purpose statement. There's only two commonalities in every purpose statement. They all begin with the words, I must, which is, if God created you for this purpose, you cannot be fulfilled or joyful unless you are doing what He created you to do. It would be akin to a hammer trying to do the job of a Phillips screwhead and not feeling fulfilled. Well, guess what? You're not going to feel fulfilled when you're doing something that is contrary to what God wants you to do. So every purpose statement must start off and does start off with I must. The other commonality is it's how do you serve other people? A lot of people's visions or dreams and so forth are really self-centered. It's how can I get wealthy? How can I be influential? How can I be famous? How can I whatever? That's not what God created you to do. That's not why He gave you the gifts. When we look at the story of the talents, those talents very much, even though they're talking about silver talents, He's talking about the giftings also that He's given you. So if you are charismatic and attractive and articulate and intelligent, God does not expect you to use that exclusively for your benefit. Now, can you make money? Yes, there's nothing wrong with making money. But if that is your sole focus and not what He wants you to do with that money, you've missed the mark. You've effectively sinned because you've not done what it is that you were created to do. So for people to understand purpose, it's how do you help this world? How do you make a positive impact in this world? And then once you know that, then you start saying yes to the things that are consistent with that calling. One of the difficulties about purpose and a calling is that, first of all, it's not being taught from the pulpit. So people don't even know to look for it, even though it's throughout the Bible. Psalm 139, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. Jeremiah 1, I knew you before you were formed. Um, uh, Ephesians 2:10, you were created for good works that God prepared before before you took your first breath. It's throughout the Bible, but we're not taught, from the pulpit about purpose. Second of all, what we see of people doing ministry doesn't look like us. So we'll have a minister come in from the Congo, a missionary, and we're going, oh man, that's not me. Or we'll see a gifted worship leader with a beautiful voice, and we go, I wish that was me, but I know that's not me. Or we'll see somebody that's just super loving and joyful and giving and so forth, and you go, well, I can see part of me like that, but that's not me either. Everybody's purpose is as unique as their DNA and as their fingerprint. And when they figure that out, then they can start saying yes to the unique good works that God has for them.
So there's a lot there. I want to backtrack for just a couple seconds because you said you mentioned that you might have what seems like are positive traits, whether that's you're charismatic or you have the ability to make money or whatever it is, attractive, whatever. But I think also too, like I think I forget how you phrased it, but you basically said that what the worldly purpose of like attaining wealth or whatever is probably may not be the purpose that God has for you. And I don't
Well,
think there's
with the
necessarily
caveat, I'll be real clear there. There are
okay,
people that are designed to have success in the world so that they can fund the ministries that are out there. Okay,
right.
God's very intentional of that. And they will likely have the spiritual gift of giving,
Hmm.
and they will have a bit of a Joseph anointing on them that things just seem to work out. And God has designed them uniquely not to be entrapped by the wealth and to be able to be generous for that. We refer to those peoples as kings. Kings provide for the vision. Priests provide the vision.
Hmm.
So what you're looking at is there are people out there that God has wired to have success so that they can bring those financial resources into the world. There's nothing wrong with wealth. It's what your mindset is regarding that wealth.
Right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where I was going with that because it's like if a person is let's say well, it depends on the mindset of the person, but let's just say blessed. Let's use the word blessed and have an
Sure.
optimistic view of this. Let's say a person is blessed with this talent or this ability. I think you mentioned the mindset and the choice that they do with that. What's fascinating to me is like you can have these talents or these abilities, whatever, and because of free will, you can choose hopefully to use those things for good.
Right.
You can have the talent or the ability to accumulate wealth and hopefully use that for good. You can be a charismatic person who can influence people, hopefully you use that for good. And it's crazy that like because I do think that we are, I mean, I think maybe some of these things are learned, some of these things are learned as we go through life, but I think also some things are just natural, more natural for other people. And it's almost like you're given those things, and but
Yes,
you have
you
the
are.
free will to hopefully use that for good.
I'll give you an example. My pastor is very charismatic. He's a good-looking man,
Mhm.
and he's articulate. He also was a prisoner. He was one of the biggest drug dealers in our area. So in his youth, he used those giftings, his charisma, his um, ability to be able to be persuasive. He used those to sell drugs and to make himself, and provide for his own needs. He came to God, got a real calling on his life to be a pastor, and now he's out in the pulpit sharing the good news and trying to encourage and persuade people to accept Christ and to live a godly life. You can choose to use those gifts to sell drugs or to share the gospel. Same
Yep.
talent, same ability, different focus.
Mm. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I was talking to Pastor Collins about this too when we were talking on the podcast, and it's like, I- I think talents and abilities are one way to look at it, like that God gives you these things. But I was mentioning to him too, like struggles or some sort of hardship in your life. I think that these are, I mean, it's hard to think about it as if God gives you these quote unquote bad things in your life. But at the same time, for a lot of us, like in your pastor situation, that was an incredible moment of growth. I mean, it sounds like it was maybe self-inflicted. I know there's some things that are not self-inflicted, but that was an incredible opportunity for him to grow. And had he not, made those significant failures, maybe he would have never grown into the person that he is today and had that opportunity. But I think that if we are presented with that challenge and we do not use that to become better people, or we're presented with these talents, being persuasive or whatever it is, and we don't use that for better, I think that is disrespectful to God because we were given those things. And it's like, I don't know how else to say it other than disrespectful.
Well, it's much like the slave in the parable that Christ shared about the king who forgave the guy of like $1 million debt. And then he goes after one of his fellow slaves for owing him $100 and throws him in jail. And the king goes, wait a minute, I gave you $1 million. I forgave $1 million in you. And here you are tossing this guy into the prison because he owed you 100. You know, that's just, that's completely ungrateful. So we have these gifts and talents. We can use them to feed ourselves and again, I don't want it to sound like there's anything wrong with wealth and success. There isn't. It's the focus of that. If that is if it's just I want more money for more money, I want a bigger house, I want more toys because that's going to make me happy. That money and that pursuit of money becomes your God and you're serving that.
Yep.
As opposed to having a perspective of, man, when we just closed a big deal, I'm going to be able to give a nice fat check to this organization or to this church. I'm going to be able to make a donation that's, is even higher than I was able to make in the past. There are people that are really inspired to give based upon their success, and God continues to bless them with even more success because they were faithful with that. So, and you also mentioned something else about trials, we'll say. And God does not bring trials onto people's lives. He is not going to, there are things that happen, and can he step in and intervene? Oftentimes he does. That flat tire that you got that prevented you from getting to work, at that time could have saved you from getting T-boned in an intersection. We have no idea of all the consequences that God is constantly saving us from. The people that on the day of 9/11, they had a sick kid or had a school event and they went to see their kid at school. And so instead of being in the Twin Towers, they were, off site. Those lives were spared for a purpose, for a reason. So these things happen. Now, in the midst of that, for the believer, where is your faith? Is your faith in a God that is going to somehow use that and allow that to be a blessing to somebody else? Is he going to provide you the resources? Are these the consequences of your sinful behavior? Do you need a change? Is there something that you are doing that God's saying, listen, if you don't change, you're going to lose your family, you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose all these good things that I've given you because of the consequences of your sinful choices? There's a whole series of reasons why people go through this. Our son has had epilepsy since 1 year old. He's 38 now. So for 37 years, he has struggled with epilepsy. Kid did nothing to deserve that. There's nothing that he did that was sinful. Have I learned a lot by watching the bravery of my son as he goes through surgeries or continues to have faith in God, even in the midst of having epilepsy? Absolutely. I learned quite a bit. And I am trusting that God is going to heal him one day, and I am going to be God's front man, claiming all the goodness of God for of the miracle he accomplished in my son's life. So these things can be allowed in our life so that we can have authority to talk to other people that are struggling. If you have lost a child and your family somehow has been able to endure that trauma, and you're still married after losing a kid, which is typically, it ends in divorce, and you all of a sudden there's somebody in your church that has just lost a child, you can sit on the other side of the table with that person and go, I understand what you're going through. And they can see the pain in your eye, and they know that you know exactly what they are feeling. You have a sense of authority and privilege to be able to talk to them because you have hurt just like they hurt. And then you can give them the hope that they can get through it. Oftentimes, the example of my pastor. So, street smart, know how to avoid trouble, dealing drugs, survive prison, all that stuff. Guy is really savvy when it comes to the streets. Person comes into the church, and this person wants to manipulate, use, coerce, drag other people. He can smell fake a mile away because He gained that street smart skill when he was living a sinful life. And
Right.
so now God uses that street smarts that he has to be able to make sure that wolves don't come into his flock and create havoc and hurt people. So God will use those past experiences and for his glory, even the hard ones, and sometimes especially the hard ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you kind of elaborated on what I was trying to say there about using the trials, using them for, I mean, I don't think it's deserved. I think some things are maybe self-inflicted, but like you were saying, some things are obviously not. But then also too, there's good that comes out of that because of that. Like the good is made possible because of that. Uh, I wanted to ask you about like purpose, like lack of purpose, because I think lack of purpose, especially with young men these days, is a very big problem. I think if you,
Yes.
and I'm not sure how your pastor feels about this with his story, but if you talk to anybody who maybe has overcome an addiction or is in the addiction space or in the crime space, a lot of these things stem from lack of purpose. You know, and so I don't know. I think it's incredibly, and I can't speak for women because I don't have that experience. But I think for a man, a purpose and direction for your life is, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, is one of the most important questions you can ask yourself.
Yeah, men are task oriented. It's
Mm.
like, that's why they do so well in military and in sports and so forth. It's like, we're going to take that hill. We're going to score this touchdown. We're going to beat that guy one-on-one. I mean, it's that sort of competitive nature that are in men. Not to say that women can't be competitive. There's some very competitive women out there.
Right.
But my point is that it's a natural element with a lot of guys. And when that is not focused in a healthy place, it can be very self-destructive where they're playing video games all day or sitting on the couch and being 80 pounds overweight in their early 20s. I mean, there's all kinds of negative things. If you notice, there's a real concerted effort to destroy an image of a man even at a young age now. The whole aspect of masculine toxic masculinity and things of that nature, that's baloney. God wants men to be men. He wants them to be protectors. He wants them to be providers. He holds the man more responsible than he does the woman. A lot of people talk about the story of Adam and Eve, and Adam and Eve, were both there together. But they all focus on Eve ate first, and Eve was deceived, and Eve this and Eve that. Okay. When God came into the garden after that, he said, "Where are you guys? Adam, what have you done?" All the early conversation was with Adam, not with Eve. He held Adam accountable for Eve's action. Adam was supposed to be her protector. Adam was supposed to be her counselor. Adam was there as Eve was being deceived. Adam was supposed to say something, say, we're out of here. And he didn't. Guys, you got a failing marriage. God's going to hold you responsible for your part in that. You are lazy and unmotivated. God's going to hold you responsible for that.
Yeah.
You were created for powerful things, God's warriors, and don't settle for a milquetoast soft version of what a man is. Step up, be a man, and become who God created you to be.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's such a good point. I think a lot of these problems that are going on in society right now is because of, I think it's because of the lack of true masculinity, the lack of that guidance, that masculine guidance. A lot of people don't, and not saying that's their fault. I'm just saying they don't have that in their life. A lot of these young guys don't have that in their life, and then so it's misguided, and they follow things that they really shouldn't follow, people they shouldn't follow, and that's obviously on the men to repair that. This like the absent fatherhood. That is obviously the men that
Yep.
need to repair that. And I think another thing too is that I think you're right. I think part of the solution is allowing men to be the men they're supposed to be, and for some reason they're not allowed to be that these days. But I do think that's part of the solution, because like this whole conversation we're having right now about purpose and ambition and being driven. There's a portion of people who, for some reason, do not agree with that message. And I think the perfect balance of men and women is that when they can exist in harmony, because there's clearly differences between the two. Clearly
Yes.
one difference helps the other, and vice versa. And I mean, that is the beauty, I think, of the relationship, between a man and a woman. But what happens when one side is either not allowed to be that, or not encouraged to be that, or made to feel like they're a villain for doing that? I mean, like, these are all like big questions.
Yeah. So you can sit back and be a victim and
Mhm.
believe it, or you can believe God. Really, that's the difference. You have a choice to walk into your purpose and your destiny and your calling. And guess what? It's going to be tough.
Mhm.
It's going to be a struggle. You have the entire world system against you. This attack on masculinity, this is not some kind of, abstract, aberration. This is an intentional assault on the church and God's children.
Mm.
Men are being told not to be men. They're being
Mhm.
told not to be leaders. They're being told not to be courageous. I mean, just look at that idiotic situation in the subway in New York. Daniel Penny stood up and was a man.
Mhm.
And what did the system do to him? Try to throw him in jail. Now, thank God there are enough clear thinking New Yorkers who said, no, this guy's a hero. But that's what the world is trying to do. So we need discipleship in the church.
Mhm.
I don't know about you. I was not discipled. Was I under the teaching of a lot of good teachers? Yes. Did I hear a lot of good sermons? Yes. Did I see a couple examples of what a man was supposed to be that were positive and affirming? Yes. But I wasn't discipled. I believe discipling is understanding what Cody was designed for and then working alongside Cody so that he can become the best version of that, to help him with false beliefs that he has accepted about himself or about God or about his place in this world, and deal with that and help him to cope with that, to make sure that he has the strength and conditioning necessary to be on the front lines of spiritual warfare. That's what we're called to do. Christ's last words to the church: go and spread this gospel, make disciples. Okay, the church is, for the most part, spreading the gospel. Sometimes it's a watered down, you know, hard to understand gospel, and not necessarily what Christ is wanting us to share. But hardly anybody is being discipled anymore. It's I think the only people that are being discipled are those that are going into full time ministry. That are going into the pulpit. We all have a ministry. If you are a child of God, male or female, you have a ministry. And God wants to be in the midst of it and empowering it, just like he did for his son Jesus when he was on earth.
Yeah, you put that in such a good way, and you use the word disciple, and I like that, because so my understanding is the disciple is the person who spread the message from Jesus. They spread Jesus' message to others, and I think,
Disciples make disciples.
yeah. And so I think, and it's like I said earlier, one of the best ways to maybe, I don't know about solve, that's a very heavy way to say it, but one of the ways to help this issue with men is for men to help other men, for us to disciple
Yep.
other men, and maybe God, maybe we've been there before, or a similar situation, like you said, and we help that person through that, grow through that, improve through that. And I think that's a big thing, because I think there's too much of, like, you know the back and forth between men and women. Men say this about some women say this about some men, and it's like, what if we just both kind of like fixed our side of it, and like the men help the men? And I mean, I don't know, who knows what might happen. Because it's a crazy thing for somebody. It's like I said.
That's a kind of practical solution, Cody. I don't know. It
Well,
just
it's
seems like the obvious thing to do, and I agree with you completely.
Well, it's like I said earlier, like, I can't speak on women's issues, or I can't really
Right.
tell, because I'm not, that's not my experience. I just feel like it makes much more, and even like, I feel like with men, there's like a certain guy that I have, like, that experience. I can't really help all men, and vice versa. Like
No,
all men, so but there's enough of us, and there's enough variations that we have sort of people that we are similar with, and we can help those on that path. And I just think that if we do that, if both sides do that, I think that that's we'll improve. Um, but
can I address that, because
yeah.
that's one of the areas where our ministry differs from virtually everything else that is out there. I agree with you. You aren't going to be able to encourage, be an example for every man.
Hmm.
And for some men, in a general sense, you can be an encouragement too. But there is a specific group of men that are wired in a similar fashion that you are,
Mm-hmm.
that you can really minister to.
Yep.
And so with our assessment program, we figure out by the assessments who are leaders. Okay, leaders need to be discipled by other leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Who are counselors? They need to be discipled by other counselors. And this is male or female. Who are the teachers? They need to be discipled by other teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Effectively, if you look at the gifts from Christ, the fivefold gifts, so the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher, those are all your major categories of service in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a mature apostolic man, he should be discipling a young apostolic guided man, so that he can start to show him what it takes to start a ministry, what it takes to build a team. If you have a mature evangelist woman, she should be working with a young female with an evangelist calling in her life, so that she can show them how to get over stage fright, or how to get over speaking in public, or how to convey the truths of the gospel in a very simple and understandable way.
Right.
These are things that we have people in our congregation that have already learned these lessons. We simply need to have a way to match them up with those that they need to counsel, and those that they need to support and disciple. And then have a comprehensive approach to it, so that we can get them ready for their place in the front lines of ministry.
Mm. Yeah, that's I agree with that. That kind of leads me into a question I wanted to ask earlier when you mentioned that you had this. I don't know if you mentioned an assessment or some sort of way to go through this. Is there like a certain key questions you're looking for, certain things you're trying to find out in this process? And is it also too is this like just for men, or is it just like everybody, or?
It's for everybody.
Okay.
Any believer can go through our program. We have 11 different assessments.
Okay.
9 of the 11 are psychometric, and the other 2 are spiritual. Psychometric assessments are a very small sliver of assessments that have gone through third-party reliability and validity testing. Things that people would know would be like DISC or Myers-Briggs or Clifton
Okay.
Strengths. Those are all well-known psychometric assessments. Ours were developed in private practice, and they were used in private business consulting for companies like Coca-Cola and IBM and Lucent Technology and Clorox and so forth. But they were developed by a born-again believer. So I was introduced by one of his students to learn how to properly understand how to evaluate these assessment results that a person goes through. And I then went on to LinkedIn and found the guy that actually developed these and said, hey, I want to use these in the church. I want to start to create curriculum for the church. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm going to have questions when I run into design conflicts and so forth. Will you help me? Yeah, I'll take your calls. Found out later on that he was a born again believer, that he's always wanted this for the church, but the church was kind of standoffish. Oh, that's, I'm not interested, or, I'm not really wanting to implement that, or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2019, we were on a call, and he goes, JR, you have made more progress in getting this into the church than anybody else has in the last 30 years. I'll partner with you to get this available to anybody that wants to go through your ministry. And so the vision and the work that God created through this man in the 80s is now impacting God's church in 2025 and going forward to have the impact that God always intended. He just needed me to get off of my butt and do what I was called to do to be able to take this vision to the next step.
It's crazy, man. I think sometimes we see ourselves as, like you said earlier, smaller than we are. It's easy for us to see ourselves as a very small piece of a much bigger picture. But I think we underestimate that sometimes. Like underestimate how important our role is in a thing.
Look at the game of chess. The game of chess has all kinds of rated players, but a pawn can take a rook.
Yep.
A pawn can take a knight. We're not all the kings and queens, but we could be a bishop, or we could be a rook, and we can have the impact. The thing about it is that we just need to know what our role is and trust when God is leading us that he's the master chess player. He knows what he's doing. He knows when he says, Cody, call your friend. He knows the ripple impact that that's going to have on your relationship with that friend long before you do. The thing is that we have to get to the place where we start to say yes to God when he asks us to do uncomfortable things. Let me give you a perfect example. At the end of 2015, my software company experienced the worst loss that we've ever experienced. And I don't want to go into the details. It had to do with some employee issues. And I was left with the decision to either close the company at the end of 2015 and take whatever money is left over and do something else, or allow the company to continue on, but me stop taking a paycheck. That was the only way it was going to be able to survive. And when you're in that position as a business owner, you can't go out there and sell your product because you don't know if you're going to be in business in 3 months to be able to support that software product. And so I was left with a lot of time on my hands in 2016. And God orchestrated this. God did this intentionally. Towards the end of that year, an acquaintance came out to me and says, hey, JR, I teach this assessment training program, and I think you'll be great for it. Now, I knew the man, and I go, yeah, you just want to make money off of me. And I haven't had a paycheck in 9 to 10 months. I'm not going to, I'm not going to waste my money on something like this. So I told him no. Left him, went home, and I felt this tug, do it. And I'm going, what do you mean do it? This makes no sense. I'm out of work. I still own the software company. I still own it today, and it's still in business. But I'm not getting paid, God. Okay, I'm working for free from the software company. I kind of need to do something that's going to replace that income. He says, do it anyway. All right. So I called up. I was in the midst of that training in about my second week, and I'm going, oh my gosh, there's something here. It has defined me in a way that I've never experienced. And it's defined my wife in a very unique way that I've never been able to articulate about her. So I continued the training for 9 months. And at one point during the process, they shared all the multinational organizations that these assessments have been worked in. I'm going, yeah, but this is for the church. Even though my background was in business, and that would make sense to, do consulting with businesses with these assessments, since that's what it's been used for. God says, no, I want you to do this for the church. Now, had I not said yes to that uncomfortable situation about taking that training, I'd never gotten to the place where I would have seen the validity of it. I never would have gotten to the place where God could say, I want you to do this for the church. That would have never happened. I had to put aside my better judgment, because it's not better. We're talking about God here. His judgment is better. And I had to say yes to him and then follow in faith without any indication or understanding where he was leading me. I still don't know where he's leading me, to be quite honest. I've had words of knowledge and prophets talk over me, and I'm a little scared of some of the things that they said that we're going to do. But I still trust God that he knows what he's doing, and he's just going to lead me to that next step.
Yeah. Man, so this is crazy because what the story you're saying right now is like a real world example of something that I talk about a lot, which is that if you have a intuition or a goal or something comes to you and you say, I need to do this thing, it might be very heavy. You might doubt whether you can do it or not or whatever. And what I tell people is that like if that voice or that thing appears to you and comes to you, you need to be able to trust that. And I think one of the ways, in my personal experience, my personal opinion, one of the ways that you can trust that voice is to have before that point had done something to prove yourself to yourself. I think you said your business experience was somewhat relevant to like the vision. And so I guess my question would be, what do you think it was that gave you the sort of confidence or faith to pursue that, even though you were, I guess, maybe intimidated or whatever by it?
God kind of beat me down. He really did. And 2016 was a tough year. Uh, as soon as I made the decision to stop taking a paycheck, I then went out and started looking for other ways to generate income for our family. And God has always provided for our family, always. And so I went into all the obvious ways: consulting, contract programming, any number of different areas. And I didn't get a whiff of an opportunity, not even like a chance. I would go to a CPA firm that was installing software similar to what I was doing, of which I've had at that point over 30 years of experience of actually implementing, and and nothing would happen. And so I'm thinking, all right, this isn't right. By May of 2016, I was so frustrated because every door was getting slammed. I spent thousands of dollars in Facebook and Google ads that went nowhere, not a single response. And so it's like in May of 2016, I'm sitting in the chair that I'm looking at right now, and I just was really frustrated. And I said out to God, okay, I know you're behind this. What do you want? He had to get my attention. He had to say, stop striving in areas that I don't want you to go anymore because I'm not going to bless it. I need you to be open to what I want you to do. So part of this process has to do with learning how to hear God. I'm releasing a new book very soon called Sparks Turn into Brushfires. And it's an autobiographical account of how God has spoken to me in various situations, like that story that I just gave you. I'm going off in my own direction, and every door is slammed in my face, and God hasn't ever done that to me. It's always, I would go out for a job interview, before owning my company, and I would go on 2 interviews, and I would get offered both jobs. I mean, that's what I was accustomed to. I would get let go from one company right before Christmas after we closed escrow in the house, and the following month we had more money come in to our house in the month of January than we've ever had up until that point ever. God's always showed up that way for me. So when he didn't in 2016, I'm going, what do you want? I don't know what you want. And so it became a process of, all right, I'm listening. I'm trying to hear you. I was writing short stories. I was writing articles and poems and so forth. A lot of those things was God talking to me through my poems, to the short stories, telling me, I got you on this. I'm going to be with you throughout this process. I was reading devotions, and I was doing, writing articles of things that challenged me in a spiritual sense. God was talking to me through all those things. And he finally got me to a point where in September, October of that year, when he said, I want you to do this. And I said no at first. He says, no, I want you to do this. It was like, okay, God, I'm tired of kicking against the goads, as what Jesus said to Paul on the road to Damascus. I'm tired of it. Sure, I'll do it. And then it was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I found out I was able to experience joy. Back in 2013, I wrote an article called What is Joy? And it was prompted by the life of Paul, who was shipwrecked and whipped and caned and imprisoned and stoned and left for dead and all this. And he counted it all joy. And I'm going, no, I can't do that. I get a flat tire and I think the world's over. I can't, I can't, I'm out of work for a few months and, I'm falling apart. How does he do that? And I was really struggling with that thought in my head. And God whispered, he was doing what I created him to do. And it was like, that was it. Joy is being obedient to God's calling in your life. I never had a consistent form of experiencing joy until I started the Brushfires ministry and had been able to be privileged to help other people discover their purpose. In that article in 2013, I wrote, I want to be part of a church that will help me discover what God created me to do. And then I want to turn around and help other people figure that out. In 2013, I knew what my calling was. I literally wrote it out and posted it on social media. But I didn't have the ability to pursue it or the vision to pursue it, or I wasn't in the right place to pursue it until 2016. And that was only after God said, yeah, this whole software company thing, you're not doing that anymore. I got something else for you to do. And me finally starting to say yes to what he wanted me to do.
Man, this this makes me think of the story in the Bible. I mean, there's plenty of stories in the Bible where this is the case, but this one I think has a lot of wisdom, which is that it's my understanding that David, before David was a king, right? But before he became a king, he wasn't sent something easy. He was sent Goliath to overcome. And then I think at least my understanding is once he beat Goliath, then he became the king or whatever it was. Is that right? He did become a king. Was that?
He was actually anointed by Samuel as the next king.
Okay.
Long before that.
Okay.
But he was actually brought into the royal court at that point because of his accomplishment.
Okay.
And so he
So
was under
overcoming
King Saul.
Goliath, it like significantly helped him.
Oh
Like
yeah,
he,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It changed his life.
yeah. Okay. And that's kind of what I'm saying. We're sent these metaphorical giants, or these, like my tattoo. I talk about this sometimes on the podcast. It actually has a story. My tattoo, so there's a knight on this side slaying the dragon, and the mythical story is that like when the knight slays the dragon guards the treasure, and then you get the treasure. And so it's like I think that's a metaphor for some things that we experience in our life. And I think that especially when you're changing careers like that, because I'm just, as you're saying this, like I have a company too. I have a landscaping company. So I put myself in this space and I imagine what would it be like to, be told that I need to shift from that. That I don't know, man, that'd be a very, very heavy thing, because I mean, it sounds like you did too. Like I put a lot of work into that. I built that from the ground up, I mean, I got blood, sweat and tears in that thing.
Oh no, it was a tough thing to stop receiving a six-figure annual salary. That was kind
Yeah.
of tough to do, but
Yeah.
that was the only way that my employees were going to get paid, and that was the only way that my clients were going to get service if I stopped taking a regular paycheck. And so, yeah, that was a tough thing to do. And it wasn't my plan. My plan was to have that company go for another 8 years, and then at 65, slowly begin to wind it down. And God said, "No, I got something else for you, and I need your attention." And it took a while for him to get it. But so the thing that we're all searching for, I just want to be real clear, and most people haven't experienced this, is joy. Joy is the production is processed, or sorry, joy is produced by being obedient to God's calling in your life. You cannot be obedient to his calling without being in his presence and without getting the direction and the guidance directly from him. It's not as if God says, hey, Cody, I want you to do this and check back with me in 9 months or 10 years or whatever. It's
Right.
not the way it works. Okay, if you have kids, all right, so you're now in this for at least 18 years and maybe longer before they're out on their own. And so you just sort of move on. That's not the way your calling works. You need to be with them every day to figure out what the next step is. How do I deal with this challenge? Am I going in the right direction? Um, am I doing this right? It's that constant relationship that you have with God. That intimacy with God, where He sees what He created in you coming to life, because your free will is saying, yes, Lord, I'm going to do what you created me to do. That produces joy. Whenever your life coincides with God's plan for your life, that produces joy. A mother can go for 9 months in difficult pregnancy, but you put that healthy baby in that mother's arms, she's weeping and crying for joy. Okay? You meet the woman of your dreams, the woman that God has set aside for you, and you are in that moment where you're looking at her eye to eye and you're saying your vows, dude, your eyes are watering up because you have just been blessed by one of God's princesses in your life.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that God always intended for to happen in your life. And so when your life choices coincide with that, it produces joy. What I learned about the life of Paul is that he figured out that obedience to God's call in his life allows him to experience joy, to be able to go through any kind of situation and still count it all joy, because he's in relationship with his creator. He's seeing the power of the Holy Spirit work through him. That is what every human being desperately wants. Now, sin is nothing but an addictive substitute for joy. It promises those feelings, and it gives you an aspect of euphoria for a short period of time, and then it goes away. But it goes away with a hook that says, you need more of that. You need more of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's how addiction works. And I don't care if you're addicted to work or porn or, whatever you're addicted to, that's how it works. It promises you something that's never going to deliver, but each time it requires more and more of your soul in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Joy is just the opposite. When I'm done doing a DDM, I got to sit down. God has just worked through me and I am exhausted. I am literally drained internally, as if I had been exercising for 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, I just got a text from one of the ladies that went through my program, who is in her 50s, I think, maybe early 60s, somewhere in there. Hopefully she's not hearing this if I got her age wrong. But she texts me, she says, I want you to know that I just signed up for that counseling program. Thank you for the encouragement. She's got a counseling calling on her life. I mean, by all estimations, she's, beyond the time for she should be going to school for counseling, but the girl's got counseling on her life. And so she's obediently doing what God has called her to do. And I'm blessed to see where that's going to lead her. That gives me joy. It was my obedience to God's calling to meet with her, to counsel her and her husband, that caused her to say, yes, I'm going to pursue this counseling. And she's going to do great things for other women and people in her life because of that obedience.
Yeah, man, I don't think people understand how powerful, I mean, because what I hear when I say when you say this is like being in alignment with your calling. Like, because you look at people who are doing great things on the world and in the earth, like Elon Musk, like how is he doing all these things? Like the dude is aligned, like he has found his calling on this planet, and you're just motivated by that, you're energized by that. And then it's like people that we see people in various different careers and stuff, and it's just like they have all this energy or whatever, but it's like I think they're in alignment with who they're supposed to be, and I think that's absolutely critical. Before we close out, because I know you gotta get going here, I gotta go too. But before we close, if you could, and I know this is a very broad question, it kind of depends on everybody, everybody's experience. But if you could maybe narrow it down to somebody who's, searching for their purpose, if they can't find this purpose for themselves, um, I don't know. What do you think? What kind of sort of guidance? I guess just general guidance, because I know it depends on the person's situation. What would you tell them who they don't really know this purpose?
Well, our ministry is to help them. So we literally have
Okay.
these assessments and the video training series and books for them to learn it. The thing is that once your purpose statement is spoken out and it's solidified during that counseling situation, like with that lady that just signed up for that counseling program,
Mm-hmm.
your spirit confirms it. It's like, yes, that's who I am. I'm being seen. It's a very intimate moment where God says, this is what I spoke you into existence to do. It's exactly what our ministry is for.
Hmm.
Now, you can continue to kind of struggle around and bounce around and try to figure it out. But, we think it's so important that we literally have scholarship programs for people that can't afford our program. Now,
Hmm.
we do require your pastor to confirm that you really need a scholarship and that you're not just somebody trying to take advantage of us. But that being said, we do want people to be able to discover their purpose and to be able to live this out. And as they pursue it, it gets more and more certain in their life. I am more certain of my calling in my life today than I was in 2016 when I got my purpose statement. I I am fully expecting this year to launch us to new heights with the release of this new book and our discipleship program or discipleship framework system as it is released. I know that God is behind it, and I've seen what He's already done
Hmm.
just to get us to this place. And so it's like, all right, Lord, I don't know how you're going to do it. I'm just doing what you've told me to do, and I'm trusting that you're going to deliver me to that next place that I can continue on with this work. And you're going to bring me the people that I need to be able to fulfill that ministry. And so that's what we're doing, Cody. And that's what everybody needs to do. There was a movie that was released last year or the year before called The Forge. God is calling his church to start to do biblical discipleship. We need to do biblical discipleship.
Hmm.
You need to have men that you can go to that will give you wise counsel that
Yep.
can relate to your current situation. You need people that can train you in areas that you're not gifted in. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important for you to know that Jesus was 100% man and 100% God? Why is that important? Well, if you're not certain that Christ's sacrifice was sufficient for your life, if you're not certain about that, the enemy is going to use that as a weapon in your head and cause you to doubt your salvation. There is a reason why these things are necessary. Why do you have to pray? You need to pray because you need to be in a position where God can talk to you. Why do you need a tithe? You need a tithe because if you don't, you'll be the slave to the money and it'll
Mm.
be your master. If you can give 10% off the gross of every dollar that comes into your house and not bat an eye and trust that God's going to provide for it, you have complete victory over money in your life. There's reasons for these disciplines that are there so that you can get ready for the work that God wants us to do. And most of us are just barely scratching the surface on getting ready. It's like we've all enlisted into the Christian army, and we're still at day one trying to figure out how to button our uniform. We're not ready to go to battle.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even know the right end of a gun yet, or the right end of a sword.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get ready. The battle's coming. We need to be ready.
You know, I think I was actually just talking to somebody earlier before our call, and she mentioned that she thought angels were here to help us, which I certainly agree with that. But I think the battle's already here, man. I think this spiritual warfare is already here. You know,
It is.
you mentioned this warfare on masculinity and on the family, and on
Yep.
all this stuff, and I think it's already here. And so I think we do need to, you know, prepare or be prepared, because we don't know. We don't know. And I don't know I don't know how I don't know the story really of the rapture or how it works. I don't know if we go through this for a while, or if we're just sort of, I guess maybe saved from that experience. But I do think that the spiritual warfare is for sure. I mean, if you just look at the state of the world and of politics and the whole deal, I mean, it's just, I think it's already here.
All right, Cody. So go to our site, register for, on our site so I can get your contact information. The book that I told you about, the one I'm writing, The Sparks Turn into Brushfires, that going over all this.
Mm-hmm.
In 2001, God gave me a dream telling me where I was going to be when I get raptured. It's going to happen in my lifetime. Now, I can't convince, and I'm not here to convince anybody of that, to be quite honest.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea why God wanted me to have that dream in 2001 until I started the Brushfires ministry. And then I'm going, oh, you want your church to get ready because you're coming back, and you're coming back soon. That book should be released shortly. It'll be available to everybody that's registered on our site for free. And I can assure you, with everything that I believe to be true in my life, that Christ is coming back in my lifetime. And his church is not ready, and we need to get ready. So, just it's coming. And we have I look at the current election and I go, we have 2 to 3 years of a reprieve before it's full court press on the church. And we need to get ready now while we still can, because if COVID taught us anything, the government will shut us down.
Yep.
And yeah, so I just encourage your people to go to our website, brushfires-digital.com. If they register as a user, they will receive one of our assessments free of charge and 2 books. And they will also be ready to receive the next book. It'll be available online for free. So that will be, hopefully I'm looking at 60, 90 days before that's going to be released, but it's coming soon. And if they want, they can sign up for one of our packages and begin figuring out what God created them to do, because the battle is here. We're already in the midst of the battle, and we need to get ready for what's coming. I'm not talking about violence. I want to be real clear here. That's not how God does things. I mean, he did in the Old Testament, so if he does, he does. But I don't think that's what God's calling us to do. God wants to give humanity one last chance to accept his son as their savior before the tribulation period. That's the heart of the Father. And so there are going to be people out there that are needed to spread the word. There are going to be people that need to be out there to train those new disciples. There are people out there that need to encourage and help others heal so that they are ready for the battle that is coming. The church needs to get ready, and we are not ready. So people can read the book themselves. I met with my pastor that morning because I was so shaken by that dream, and he encouraged me to write it down. So what they will be reading was what literally happened that day as I felt it. And they can be the judge if I'm a crazy person or not.
I don't know, man. I think I talk about dreams a lot, and dream analysis. I'm very big on that. I don't think dreams are random at all.
No.
And so if you can send me the links for all that stuff, we'll definitely attach them to the videos and all that good stuff. So one more thing before I close. This is something I usually ask everybody. If you could share one of the most important lessons you've ever learned, just a piece of wisdom to leave us with, and maybe you've already touched on it, but it could be something from your personal life if you're comfortable sharing, or your career, your business. What do you think is one of the most valuable lessons you've ever learned?
Every human being is incomplete at birth, and that is because of the sin that happened in the Garden of Eden. We are born incomplete because we do not have the Spirit of God in us. The free offer of Christ is to reconcile that and to reunite you with God so he can begin to counsel you and direct you and lead you to where he wants you to be. What God wants for you and has for you is better and greater than anything that you can imagine. And so accept that free offer of salvation. And if you have, then ask God how you can be used in his kingdom, what you were designed for, and get about doing that work, because you will get to know God as he begins to work through you in a way that has never happened before in your life.
Man, that's an incredible answer. Yeah.
Well,
I appreciate that.
It's one of the things that I've learned is that what God teaches you, you're supposed to turn around and to teach others. So that was a lesson he had to teach me. And my job is to go out there and to give that hope and promise to every other believer that is out there.
Well, I think you're definitely doing that. At the very least, you're definitely on the path for that. And I appreciate you, coming here, sharing this with us today, and for being on I think essentially on the front lines of what is unfortunately turning into a spiritual warfare. But I think if we're on the right side, I don't think it's as unfortunate as it maybe seems. So I appreciate it. I appreciate the conversation here. If you can hang out, I do need to talk to you about the upload for just a minute or so. But yeah, definitely appreciate your time and insight here today.
All right. Thank you, Cody. And again, your people, go to brushfires-digital.com and check us out.
Hey guys, I appreciate you tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more content at Pure Wisdom Podcast. This is on Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple and Google Podcasts. There you can like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time.